Okay. How do you want to open this one?
Episode 3 drops us right in with Eddie. We kind of get a little bit of Eddie in episode 2, but 3 we really get into the nuts and bolts of Eddie's life, which I've heard from most people that I talk to is the actually most disturbing episode to listen to. For good reason. Did you ever think we were going to talk to Eddie throughout this whole project when we started?
No, I didn't even have Eddie on my list.
Yeah.
Which is really weird to think about. I'm so glad we did talk to Eddie. He added... I feel like sitting down and talking with Eddie shifted the storytelling.
Yeah.
Shifted the podcast a little bit. And I'm so glad we did. No, I wasn't going to sit down with any of the kids.
And now, the story of phone calls, interviews, case files, and Josh and Amanda spilling it all. I'm Amanda Fallon, and this is the Shirley You Can't Be Serious behind the scenes.
I didn't know what to expect with Eddie. Immediately when we sat down with Eddie, I felt, oh, he's a very nervous person. And showing up that day, and when we pulled out the mics and things, and he stood up and grabbed his stuff off the table, and I thought, oh, I think we just scared him with all the gear. And then I was going back to the couch to grab something else out of my bag, and I felt like I heard him mumble something like, oh, I wasn't expecting all of this, or something like that.
Yeah, because that's what my dad said too. And then I think my dad went out after him, and then you followed.
Yeah.
And I was just like...
And he had kind of scurried
praying.
into the yard, and I don't remember what I talked to him about. And he was smoking a cigarette, and...
Well, and it's the first time I had seen Eddie in probably 2 years. Because Shirley passed away in 2023. And I would have seen him... Oh, that summer. Actually, I can tell you exactly when I saw Eddie. The kids and I went down to Tucson to visit my dad and Shirley the summer of 2023 because Shirley wasn't feeling very well.
Yeah.
And I don't normally go to Arizona in the summer. Like... When I go to Arizona, it's November to March. I was like, I vowed I'll never go in the summer.
I'm waiting till I die to go to the hot place.
Yeah. And I remember I was like, no, this is really important. I need to take the kids on a road trip. We need to go see Shirley. I just had this feeling that she wasn't going to be around much longer. And she did. She ended up passing away that September. But Eddie had come over, and we all went to Panda Express for lunch.
Is that the last time you had Panda?
Might have been. I just know that that's Eddie's favorite place. He loves going to Panda Express. And that's the last time I saw him. And then we were down there in 2025 in April to record. And Eddie never came to Shirley's funeral. So I didn't see him. I wasn't sure what we were going to get because I knew he hadn't come to the funeral. Okay, back up. My perception was him and Shirley were always close. But then Eddie doesn't come to the funeral. And then my dad is continuing to see Eddie throughout the years. And he says, Eddie's going through a lot. He's processing a lot. He's really angry with Shirley. And I was confused. So I didn't know what we were going to get that day. I had no idea what Eddie was going to share with us.
And that's funny because nobody shared any of that information with me. So I had no idea. And so when I sit down and Eddie, the first thing that he says is,
I guess this is going to be weird because... the person that you knew is a very different person than the one that I grew up with.
Yeah, and was that after he had my dad leave? I remember the first 20, 30 minutes were really awkward, really hard for him to talk. And then at some point, I think you asked him, would this be better if Steve wasn't here?
Yeah, because, it was hard for us to break the ice with him to begin with. I did notice right at the beginning, though, he had said something about mini bikes. And he's like, oh, motorcycles. Oh, that's what it was. I talked to him outside about his car. And I noticed that his fingers, he looks like a mechanic. We talked about motorcycles, and he came in. And I noticed when he was talking about motorcycles, he lit up. This is easy for me because I've never met you. I want to start... where you are now. I want to start on the other side of this story, right?
Yeah.
And just tell us where you live. Tell us why you're in Arizona. Tell us.
It's kind of like the end to a bad story.
Yeah. Well, and we've found too that the story, exactly the way you've just described it, has this reality that everyone in the story is creating for themselves.
Yeah.
And then the lessons learned through that reality, and then the things that everybody's healing from.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most powerful theme, this whole story. So I want you to tell us, I mean, you could tell, this is your story, so you could tell us or not tell us anything you want. And I think a good way to do it and revisit it is, let's talk about where you are now and how you feel.
You were just telling me out there.
Yeah, I know, but part of it's like the thing I recognize most the latter years that she's spent with you. I'm the door to the dark closet in somebody's past. And you loved my mom, and she loved you. And that I know. And the last thing I want to do is bring up dark skeletons in front of you, because this was your person, your love, your life. And
You want me
and
to go away someplace?
and
Would it be easier? I don't have
well,
to.
yeah, because pretty much there's not a whole lot that I'm going to say in front of you, because I don't want to hurt or offend you. Or like, nobody wants to see their heroes cast down. And she was a light and a joy to your life, which like I said, good things come out of everywhere, you know, and it's not my place to bring injury to that. But the reality is that's where my sister and I live, is in the injury. And some things have no resolution. It's like, for my sister and I, that's probably never going to change. The only thing we can do is be honest with ourselves about the hurt and move on. And that's pretty much what we've done and where we're at. And like I said, I don't see a resolution. I see it, like we talk, the snowball effect all the way down the hill to the dysfunctional lives of her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, you know. And it's like, it's, you know, to me, it's a sad story, and but it is what it is. And
I'm going to take off. You just call me when.
Okay.
Okay.
and like I said, I don't want to hurt your feelings in any way, shape, or form, including just even saying that I don't want to talk about these things for you. It's not because it's purely from that standpoint of I don't want to throw mud on your image of the person that you've spent the last 20 years, you know, loving. And
Well, this
you
would
know,
be a good chance for you to bring me.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm going to take off. Just let me know when.
You be okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's plan to
Ed and I,
meet.
we have a good relationship.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
11:04. We'll call you in about an hour.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll have some lunch together.
Okay.
Does that work, Dad?
Yep.
Okay.
And if it's more, just, you know, whatever.
Okay.
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 Love you, Ed.
Love you,
Alright.
Pops.
Yeah, so the way I kind of want to do this is, you started off something that actually I got really excited about. You're talking about 9-year-old Ed riding a bike.
Yeah.
And that sounds like, I'm a bike nerd, and I love enduro bikes.
It was everything to me as a 9-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And one of the shiny, because it was my escape. They gave me the keys to my escape. And that's literally what I did from the time I woke up in the morning, and lots of reasons where my sister and I have always been skinny. One, Mom hated cooking. Made no bones about that.
This is actually a theme in I talk about how bad of a cook she was too.
Oh my God. Yeah. The only person worse at cooking was my dad, and he taught her to cook.
Oh, is that where she learned?
For the next 6 hours, Eddie breaks our heart and provides a really raw account of Shirley's history through his lens. We just get right on the road with them.
Yeah, and I knew Eddie and Corinne had told me about the BB gun story from their childhood. I knew about that, and I knew Ed. You got the sense right away that he wasn't a nice guy, but I didn't know to what extent. All the stories in episode 3, I was also hearing for the very first time.
Yeah.
Outside of the BB gun story. I knew Ed was rough around the edges, but Shirley never shared any of the abuse stories. So I didn't know any of those. So listening to Eddie talk about them was a first for me.
I had a different understanding. I thought, okay, it went from me believing Ed is a petty criminal to Ed is deeply disturbed, right? In the recent years, I have stopped describing people as good or bad, right? Like, oh, he's a bad dude. He's not a good guy, or he's grumpy, or he's disturbed, or this person, there's something not right there. So I thought that was interesting that Eddie uses those types of descriptors differently for Skaggs and for his dad. Did you notice that? But it's so interesting at the beginning where Eddie's like, I saw all the guys my mom dated, and my dad didn't match any of those.
Flew out to Colorado, and we landed, and this guy comes out, and unlike the guys that she dated, didn't have the vibe of a nice guy at all. Like literally from our first walking up to him, it's like, there was no parental bond or anything like that, or there was no, run up and hug your kid, or your kid run up and hug you, or anything like that. It was just like, this is your dad, and he was, very stern-faced individual. Like, okay, let's get in the truck.
That was really strange. So he noticed that there's a different type of attraction to Ed than the other guys that she dated.
I don't know. I said my mom, and now that you've put it out there in the question, and it's like thinking about it, it's like, yeah, I'm probably guilty too. Like I said, it rolling downhill, that you avoid people that you think are good because you don't think you're good enough, and you don't want to either disappoint them or be disappointed when it comes to light that you're not good enough. And so you kind of shoot yourself in your foot before you start. And I think that may be what played a lot into that, with her and making some of the choices that she did. And like I said, how she ever ended up with my dad in the first place, from meeting on the beach, this one-armed guy, and I think she just liked, he was this rebel back in the day when that was cool, or becoming cool, that rebel image.
And then it's kind of a subtle detail though, right? She's like, okay, well, he comes down to Colorado and I go meet him there. So they took a road trip.
Ed wasn't allowed in the state of California. He was a wanted man.
Yeah.
So that's why they had to meet in Colorado. Like, Ed couldn't go to California. He was wanted in that state for faking his death.
Yeah. I guess the important detail is that they take the Alcan run, right? The Alcan Highway up to Alaska, which was fairly new, right?
Yeah, Shirley said it was 1,200 miles of dirt road.
Yeah. So they were just doing like the base. They were just doing all these things, which is a cool moment, right? Too.
She talks about hitting the Alcan Highway. She says she's in the car with the kids and one dog, and Ed is in the truck with his two dogs, towing another truck filled with all their stuff that they accumulated after South Africa.
And so Eddie quickly says, hey, I met this menacing man, very stern-faced, and he told me, here's your wolf. So it's what I do find really fascinating about all of Eddie's accounts is he bought into the I'm rough with you because it's for your own good.
Well, let's talk about that for a moment. So there's two stories that really stick out to me. And Eddie... Okay, the first one is when they're driving up the Alcan Highway.
Yeah.
And Eddie burns himself with the boiling
Yeah.
water. And he's telling the story about how he fell asleep in the truck with his dad. His dad was driving. He falls asleep. And he dreams about being a balloon man that
Yeah.
can't breathe. And I'm thinking in my head, while he's telling us that story, I'm like, were you on the verge of death? You probably were passing out from the pain of this burn and literally like suffocating. And your dad wakes you up, and Eddie's so grateful. He's like, yeah, I really appreciated my dad that day for, waking me up. And I'm like, you just got 3rd-degree burns on your leg, and your dad beat you.
Yeah.
And your little tiny 7-8-year-old body is trying to heal.
He was just so excited to have a dad. Like,
And he falls asleep, and I'm like, I think you were passing out from
well,
pain.
it could have been a fever dream because he was probably infected by then.
That's
it could
true
have been,
too, yeah.
But again, in that moment, he says,
That was an adventure. Unfortunately for me, it was not a great adventure. They got to see just how old school my dad was.
it wasn't, I got to see how abusive my dad was. I got to see how, right, like mentally ill my dad was. It's really, one thing that stood out to me is the way he described that. Many years ago, I saw an interview with the Jacksons. Joe Jackson, Michael Jackson, all them. He used to beat them up, and he used to cause all kinds of emotional abuse to them. And I saw interviews with them, and I saw an interview. So I heard from Michael, right? And he was like Eddie. He didn't have anything good to say about his dad. And then I saw another interview with Janet, and she said, my dad was just old school, and used those exact words. And for me, it was kind of interesting because it was so relatable in one way, because my parents, if you ask me, I would say, yeah, my parents are old school Guatemalans, and we all got spankings. But then I also was able to relate from a distance in Michael's view of, oh, that is possibly exploitative and abusive. So I think also in the way that he goes on to tell all of these stories.
Well, he finds something good in each of the abusive stories.
Yeah.
So the other story that came to mind was when Eddie was running down into the basement and falls. And granted, Ed didn't push him or was abusing him at that point, but Eddie hit his head so hard that he was about to basically start like losing it and crying. And his dad was like, hey, you didn't damage my floor, did you? Yeah. And that like snapped Eddie out of it. And he was like, yeah, that's what I needed to hear in that moment. So grateful. I'm like, no, your dad should have ran down the stairs
and taken you to the ER.
Yes. And
yeah.
so the way he described the aftermath of getting hurt.
But he also has these memories of grandeur, right? Like Ed was doing the bare minimum, and Eddie was just so grateful that he was there for it, right? He's like, oh, that's exactly what I needed at the time. No, what you needed was a CT scan. Yeah. Because you still have a bump on your head 40 years later.
Or the story that Eddie talks about when they're on the backyard and Ed's out there with his friends, and his friends are like shooting the birds. And he describes his dad, as the good guy, because his dad was like, they're not going to eat them. Why are they shooting them? Yeah. And his dad was like shooting the branches out. And this is one of the first stories that I heard where I was like, oh, maybe Ed is a good guy deep down inside. Like he never hurt animals. No,
and I do find that so fascinating, and it starts to reveal what an incredible storyteller Eddie is, in that he never crosses that line. He's able to share all of the gruesome realities of it while not tarnishing his dad. That's such a conscious decision for him to be like, hey, I'm gonna tell you all these stories and why I'm so hurt by them, but I'm gonna let you decide. I think that's what makes them even more jarring, where he's like, he tells us a story about him in the little princess dress, and then just very subtly, and that was my third grade summer, which is very Shirley, which is very Shirley's journal. Very, let me tell you, hey, I just watched a skyscraper burn, and then and that was the day that I got new shoes, August 24th, right? Like there's this huge thing, and then a very small, subtle detail. Like it's a really interesting way for him to paint a picture, and I think that's why it was so hard for so many people to listen. Like I had people that are like, I had to turn it off. Like it was, that story of this child with a boiling third-degree burn getting whipped, and then he says,
it's a hard image to get out of your head, because I'm looking around and I see all these people, other people camped in the park ground, and they're all just kind of looking. But this is back in the day where if you beat the hell out of your kid, nobody said anything, and I remember making eye contact with all these different adults that just kind of were looking like, wow, because they could see that I was hurt, and he was just pissed that I knocked over the water.
With adults, and nobody was doing anything to come to my rescue. So
Yeah, that's something that came up a lot with Eddie. Eddie talking about school, even his teachers, and how he had a couple teachers that were abusive with them.
And that hurt, because I'd see other kids' parents stand up for them, right or wrong. If they got in trouble, their parents would come storming down to that school. It didn't matter if their kid was dead wrong, and half the time they were, and I was involved, but all of their parents came for them, right? And even if they took them home and gave them a beating, but in the moment, that's their kid. Don't touch my kid. And I just kind of marveled at that, how there was always somebody in their corner, and never happened for us. It's Alaska, so it's a little different in the elementary school I went to, and in all the schools I went to, actually, the principal had a paddle hanging on the wall, and this is back in the days when they used it, and I'm very familiar with the paddle in the principal's office. But that carried over. You have your male staff teachers as well, and there was a couple of times that, like one time, a girl falls where it's ice and hill and the playground and everything like that. But she tells the teacher that I tripped her or pushed her, and I wasn't anywhere near her. But it didn't stop teacher from picking me up, by a shirt, and this little kid, and he's slamming me into the jungle gym, and I was smashing the back of my head against it was one of those Lincoln log climbing things, that we played on the big log, it's bolted together, and so, yeah, I'm just dangling. Then there was another time we were teasing a girl, and it's like, yeah, we're teasing, but he didn't know that her and I are actually friends, buddies, and we hang out after school all the time. She's one of the girls in my own little clique, but she was a super tall, awkward girl, and so we were just doing the normal razzing her, but he comes around the corner and he hears me and two of my friends razzing her, and he just loses it, and picks me up off the ground and starts slamming me into the brick wall. And then I guess he wore himself out, because he picked up my other two friends too, but they only got one planted on the wall. And I'm like, You guys got to skip all the headbanging. But there anytime anything like that happened, there was no parent in my corner, and I'd go home and say, the teacher did this, and well, that's terrible was the most you get out of mom, but she is never going to go to bat for you.
Yeah. And he had a teacher that slammed him on the bricks. And of course, when he was telling us all these stories, because I also wanted to be really careful to listen, but also analyze. You know how sometimes kids will do things and you're like, oh, you have these hints of the world is against you, or right, like victim mentality, or oh, grown-ups, or a problem with authority, like oh, grown-ups are always going to come down on me. And as I listened, I thought, there's no way Eddie was going to have a normal school experience after everything that we knew was going on at home. There's no way Eddie was going to just integrate with a bunch of other kids normally at school. He was going to be, now Eddie would be on Ritalin or Adderall, right? Like he was one of those kids that was in class and was bouncing around and was always acting out or in certain ways. I don't think in a disrespectful way because he's so proper and well-mannered, but one of those things where, yeah, he would defy probably authority or not conform a certain way. And or that kid, there's always that kid at recess that would like run off and do stuff. And
You
just
think that was Eddie?
yeah, and just kind of not see consequences. And
Yeah.
I got a glimpse into that when he's like, I was gone at 7 a.m. and no one saw me till 10 p.m. And that's what I did. And it was carved
Yeah.
my own path.
I do know Eddie's really, really smart. Like he has a photographic memory.
Mhm.
The guy is so smart. And I remember him saying in school, especially high school, if he didn't like the teacher, he wouldn't pass the class.
Yeah.
Like he felt like he was showing it to the teacher by not doing the schoolwork. But if he liked the teacher, he would get an A. And it drove Shirley crazy because she knew how smart he was.
Yeah.
And he would be failing half his classes. And the reason was, and he told me this too. I don't like that teacher.
Yeah, it's funny because I had thought of a few sequences, like when we were doing the motorcycle commercial sequence, right? And I thought, how do we make this sound just kind of have like this fantastical, right? Like this fantastic, how do we make it sound like a dream or a flashback or just something that, and I thought, what if Eddie's the one talking in the commercial, right? But then it's also a montage where he's not.
Ready to find freedom in the great outdoors? Unleash the new XR75 from Honda.
It was everything to me.
The mini bike built like a wild pony for the off-road.
Because it was my escape.
The XR75 forgets frills.
I could literally disappear at 7 o'clock in the morning.
But if you close your eyes and you imagine, it is Eddie talking through the commercial. And I wanted to make sure it was distinct, where it didn't sound like he was actually recorded in the commercial, where it was just kind of this interruption of Eddie. And then there was some explorations that I did with kid voices. And I was like, I wonder if I can find... First, I tried pitching his voice down. And then I thought, I wonder if I can find a voice that would resemble Eddie's 10-year-old voice, where he's like, and he was the best, and I would go out into the forest, and then I went down this other rabbit hole where I wasted too much time, and I probably shouldn't have, but just experimenting with his laugh as a young kid. So this kid doing the...
That was another comment I got. Well, feedback, and you too, was Eddie's laugh. A lot of people talked about Eddie's laugh. A lot of people were like, where is Eddie? Like, I just want to give him a hug. That was a huge amount of feedback I got. It was his laugh, how sad the stories were, and how people just wanted to know where he was today. How is Eddie doing? And can I give him a hug?
Yeah. A lot of people came to me and they said, oh, that laugh, it's unsettling. It's nervous.
We were calling it's probably a trauma-based laugh.
Yeah, it's kind of that George McFly is what Aaron called it, which I thought was spot on. That's the time when Frank called and he said, I just, the strongest man I know is a boy in a Cinderella dress, and I just want to meet this guy. And a lot of people that I know want to meet Eddie. My sister called and she's like, I can I go to lunch with Eddie?
I know. And Eddie, I just talked to him a couple days ago, and he hasn't even listened to the podcast
That's
yet.
perfect. That's so awesome.
I go, why haven't you listened yet, Eddie? Because we literally made a YouTube link just for you, because he's not on Apple and Spotify. And what was it? Oh, he goes, well, this one time when I was like in 3rd grade, I recorded my voice on a tape recorder and played it back, and I hated the sound of it.
Can you
So-
imagine if we had that tape?
I know, right? But I'm like, Eddie, listen to the podcast.
Well, he made it, and it's so good.
I hope he listens one day, because I think it would be really healing for him to hear Shirley,
Yeah.
to hear her stories, to hear, because he is really mad at her, and he's mad at her. The reoccurring theme with that was she wasn't there for us. You know, even though she wasn't doing any of the physical abuse, he associates it with her not protecting them.
Well, and it's like normal kids, right? Sometimes when they're like, well, my dad was never there. Yeah, your dad was there working 2 jobs, right, to do this thing. And you have the perception that the absence meant neglect. Also,
He did say talking through the pain, though, was really healing for him. And I hope it helped him in his journey. But I would really love to hear him hear Shirley,
Yeah.
you know, those journal entries where she's constantly talking about Eddie.
and that's still kind of one of our objectives, is to have him find that healing, because it'll dispel some of the beliefs that he's clung onto that are not based on a reality, just his little kid reality, right? If you're clouded as a child by abuse or certain things, you're not gonna see the bigger picture of what your parents are doing.
And like I said, we might not always feel it in the moment because it's overshadowed by other griefs, burdens, or whatnot.
And there are literal moments where Shirley says things that contradict things that he's still fixated on.
Yeah. And another part, too, part of his healing journey, and I was really sad and shocked at the same time, like why Eddie wouldn't come to his mother's funeral. And again, I hadn't heard all of these childhood stories at this point in time. But after sitting down with him, I get it. If he thinks Shirley wasn't there to protect him as a child, I'm sure her passing brought up all of those memories again, and he felt abandoned again. Because he did tell us, or he told my dad, that he felt like his mom gave up.
Yeah.
She could have kept fighting. She was only 78 years old. Like, she gave up. She didn't have to die.
Yeah.
And which, in a way, that's a really sad thought process too. And so I wonder if he buried a lot of those childhood feelings, and then with her passing, as we all do when somebody close to us passes, you kind of go back and think about that. You think about your entire life with that person. And I'm sure that that's what happened with Eddie. And he says he was really angry and he just couldn't. Well, I should add, Shirley passed away on September 12th, 2023. And we had the funeral 2 weeks later. And Eddie did show up a week early.
Yeah.
So he did call my dad saying he was at the church. And my dad was like, it's not for another week, Eddie. So I'll give him credit there. He did show up. And then I wonder if it was just too hard to come back.
Well,
he had another week to think about everything. And
I told you my theories about that, right? 2 things as you were mentioning that. Yes, I think Eddie is such a brilliant mind that he knew, hey, I haven't resolved all of these things with my mom. And I think in his mind he thought he would eventually with Shirley. And then suddenly she goes. And he's like, just like her, to just skip out on me when I'm processing and waiting for her to come around. I do think Eddie has it's evident through the whole, he was very cautious to not tarnish Ed, and he was very reverent with the image and the relationship with Coraine. And so at no point does Eddie say anything that could remotely be disparaging to his sister. And I thought that was so sweet. And it was also really revealing that growing up, Eddie slowly came to more and more realizations that his sister possibly had it worse than him, and he never intervened. He never did anything. So I think he carries that guilt. So I think when she didn't come to the funeral and he wanted to make a statement with her, it was his median. Like, it was his way to appease. You know, he shows up a week early and he's there for your dad to show, hey, I'm there to show respect in my own way, but I'm also not going to the real one to kind of have a line with my sister who's not going either to make her own statement. That's my interpretation of it, because to this day, he seems to have a very strong presence in her life. And I think that's almost to make up for just some of this guilt, which is not fair at all. He was a little kid. There was nothing he could do. But I think he carries this, hey, once he came to the realization of, oh, I'm never not going to be there for you again. And it's so powerful when he says at the end, and he gets emotional, and we were all emotional, and when he says, you never know. And now I make it a point that when I hang up the phone with somebody I care about, I tell him. So there were a lot of layers to Eddie.
Yeah. And just to piggyback, yeah, Eddie is only a year older than Corain. So they were both little
They
kids.
were little kids.
Going through this. And he had no idea what was happening to Corain until much later. And I think you nailed it. I think he has a lot of guilt by not protecting her or doing something about it. But as an 8-year-old boy, I don't think he could have.
Yeah. No, and then, right, as they grew up, I think he's selling himself short. I guarantee Eddie was that older brother that was always there. You see in Shirley's journal entries, like, there's that really funny entry where Skaggs says that their house is a circus, but in the middle it says, Eddie came home, left again to go get Corain. And you know that he was that older brother that was always there. And I think that because he is that person, once he was able to realize and look back, that's where that almost survivor's guilt came from. On that note, Eddie provides a very fascinating twist where he becomes somewhat of an anti-hero. A lot of people called and said, hey, I'm really conflicted in episode 4, when it turns out that Eddie, we keep rooting for him. We keep embracing him. And in 4, we start realizing, oh, I don't really align morally with Eddie.
Yeah.
I don't really approve of a lot of his behaviors.
And we'll have to add in more of those stories that he told us.
Yeah.
Stealing the tires.
Yeah.
All of the criminal stories. We'll have to add those into the bonus episode 4.
But I think it does something. It says something about the narrative of this story that we all played into, which Shirley from the beginning, kind of normalizing these really big things that people are doing. Again, kind of just casually, oh, I didn't care about the prison thing with Ed. Oh, our house was full of stolen stuff. They stole a car and they stripped it. It's just, it's whatever. It's interesting to see the felonies they pick and choose, right? And then Eddie later, oh, well, and we talked about this already, but that's when we realize as an audience, hey, I don't rationalize the same way Eddie does. All of these things that he downplays and that he considers harmless are pretty big deals.
Well, and that's something he shares in common with his mother.
Yeah. But also with American culture. Have you thought about that? We love rebels. I think the first time I ever came to that realization, really, I watched Aladdin. Remember the animated Aladdin? Mm-hmm. And you fall in love with Aladdin in this scene where he's running through a market and he's
After he stole
stealing
an
an
apple
apple
yeah.
and he one jump ahead of the hitman, right? And you're just like, I love this dude, and he steals stuff, and he's a street rat or whatever. And I remember that was the first.
But we feel bad for him. So we fall in love with the rebel that,
Yeah.
has it worse than us, or doesn't have that chance at life like
Yeah.
the rest of us got. Yeah, so he's stealing stuff.
But he's so cool and he's so charming. And I started noticing those patterns in popular culture. We love these bad boys that are the cool kids. Nobody likes the nerd. Nobody likes the George McFly. You like Marty crashing this party with an electric guitar, breaking... Dude, he was destructive. Marty breaking the skateboard off of this thing to skate. There's something very fascinating and very alluring to this life of defiance, which is possibly why our podcast is 82% women, right? And when you start looking at the demographic, you're like, these are suburban moms that are church-going soccer moms. Why are they so obsessed with murder and crime and
Is it
killers?
because they wish they had married the rebel?
Yeah, and it's funny, again, in the Salty Horologist, we kind of talked about this. We're like, what is the science behind this? What is the allure? Let's talk a little bit more about this episode by itself. We made some really fun discoveries as we were researching Ed more, and your dad, again, superhero of the story, your dad getting caught on the Ring camera, bringing boxes in and out.
Yes. Okay.
Full of documents.
Yeah. Let me tell the story about Ed's death certificate.
Yeah.
Which is just shocking. So Shirley passes away in September of 2023. And my dad's like out grieving and doesn't do a whole lot. And then he gets this like 6 months later, early 2024. He's like, I need to go through the house. Shirley had a ton of papers. Like, he just gets this energy all of a sudden. And maybe it's a step in grieving, like
Sure.
the process of grieving. So he starts organizing. And he'll call me. Like, he'll be like, Mandy, I found Shirley's high school yearbook. And I'm like, awesome. Hang on to it. Or be like, Mandy, I found Shirley's to-do list, like, where she had to go grocery shopping. I'm like, you could probably toss that one.
That can still be fun, though.
Yeah, so it's about a good solid year of this, of him just like sporadically calling me, and I'm like, yeah, hang on to that. And nothing like super crazy, right? Then I get a phone call, and it's Mandy. I found Ed's death certificate. And I'm like, which one? He's like, the real one. The one, out of Fairbanks, Alaska. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I'm not going to see him for a couple months. And I'm like, mail it.
Yeah.
Which I think actually he was up visiting. Yeah. I think he sent it with my daughter. And I was like, Emily, guard this with your life. She was flying out to visit me. I think she brought it on her carry-on. I was like, no, don't check it in case your luggage gets lost. Make sure it's in a nice folder. Don't lose it. So she comes and visits me, and I have the death certificate. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And not only do I have the death certificate, there's also some court orders there that, like, Ed had to pay child support to Shirley and their divorce paperwork. But the death certificate is so cool. And that might sound really weird. But on it, halfway down, there is a box with 4 tiny boxes inside of it.
Yeah.
One box says
accident, suicide, homicide, undetermined.
So obviously this was a death certificate for not a natural death, because those 4 boxes aren't usually on a regular natural death certificate. Anyways, I had always thought, ever since Shirley told me that him and Ann were fighting over a gun.
Yeah.
So in the back of my mind, ever since hearing Shirley tell me the story, of Ed passing, she's like, he was shot. And I always thought,
Yeah.
somebody shot him.
Yeah.
Somebody killed Ed.
Well,
And then seeing that death certificate in front of me with the box checked undetermined, I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. There's a lot of things to me too that didn't add up, and I wasn't really familiar with the story. Hearing Clay say, "Oh, and then he commits suicide,"
Which, that one's interesting, that even to this day, Clay thinks Ed committed suicide. And then Eddie, in his interviews with us, says, yeah, I didn't buy the story that my dad committed suicide.
Whatever story he was saying, it's like, nah, you were fighting, she got scared, and you got shot with her little 22. Because it's like, The only reason we had 22s, I had a 22 because he gave me a 22. That's the kid's gun. All of his guns are guns, 30-aught sixes and rifles and Winchester lever action cowboy guns, you know. It's like, yeah, if he was going to kill himself, he had all the stuff he needed to do it right. He ain't going to pick up a stupid 22 and shoot himself in the stomach. I was like, that's BS. And it just right away, I was just like.
So that must have been the story that was told, you know, back in 1977 at the time of his death.
But it is so great because Eddie says, suicide? Possibly. I don't buy it.
Yeah.
Right? And
with
then,
her with a 22.
That's what
he
I
had
said.
Cowboy guns and Winchester. Like, he's talking about all these rifles. He's like, if he wanted to do it, he knew how to do it.
Yeah.
He's not going to shoot himself in the stomach with a 22.
No. And that's the thing that was really interesting to me, too. Like, if you live in Alaska, you're going to have all the right things. You're not going to shoot yourself in the stomach and go to the hospital for 17 days. And not with the 22s. 22s don't kill you. That was really interesting, and that was really a fascinating piece. Yeah.
It's like what I talked about in the last episode, where I'm like, the most exciting parts of this project, like one of my top 10 favorite things has been those like, like the moments that take your breath away. The moments where you're like, oh my God, I knew it. I knew it.
Yeah.
Or like and it goes back to the same thing. Shirley's like, yeah, he got shot. No big deal. And then you see the desert. But Shirley, you didn't say it was like an undetermined.
Yeah. And that's what I love too, is here we are 40 years later. So I love this reality that we were like, oh yeah, his wife probably shot him. And we're all okay with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no sinister part about it. Even Eddie's like, well, I want her to know it's not her fault. We have a lot of other questions that she can help us solve. You know, let's go take us to his ashes, or all these things. It feels like a murder mystery. And so that story to me, the sound design for everything had it did have a very more rated R, dark, old country for old men feel. That story almost has a Only Murders in the Building type feel, right? There is a little bit of dark comedy to it. And so when I started thinking about how do we bring this death certificate to life, I instantly got this coroner, medical examiner in my head, almost like a lurchy, almost like a kind of like the Wednesday Addams.
I was just going to say the Addams Family.
Yeah. So this whole thing of it's not dark and thriller, it's more Haunted Mansion. And I started hearing this voice in my head for this examiner, and I thought of Damian Young. Do you know who that is? Recently, he was in Ozark, but his voice.
No, but he literally looks like he matches the coroner
But when you
that
hear
I'm
his
picturing in my
voice,
head.
when you hear his voice, it's that exact voice that I replicated for that moment in the morgue. It's like, because we weren't just going to sit here and read the death certificate. It was, I started getting drip sounds. I started thinking, okay, this music has to sound a little more Hocus Pocus and Addams Family and less scary Halloween John Carpenter. So I've started looking at cellos for the score on this, and the music is perfect. It's I had imagined it in my head a certain way, but then when I started mixing it with the vocals, you know, and this echoey, drippy, I wanted it to feel cold and damp and dark. And then the voice that I replicated, I took this normal voice and then took the pitch way down. And then I wanted to just have this voice that was this guy, this Damian Young guy. And I would love to say that I'm so skilled that I did it all intentionally, but there were some happy accidents that tweaking the speed and the pitch correction and using a little bit of the tones.
Alaska Department of Health and Welfare, Bureau of Vital Statistics.
His voice just came out. It's almost funny. When you're listening to it, you're like, this guy sounds kind of scary, but but he's more creepy. He's like the weird, like
well,
this.
and you don't really picture like a hospital morgue. You're picturing like, I don't know why, like a medieval cave. Like
yeah,
the
this really dark. Yeah, with like
water dripping down,
Yeah.
and he's writing this by like candlelight.
Yeah, it's like with the dingy tile, and so goes back to a lot of the recurring themes of the Young Frankenstein and that type of stuff.
Accident, suicide, homicide, undetermined. Undetermined.
I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think happened to your dad?
I think he was fighting with his new wife, and she shot him.
And so I really loved the result, and I loved how it goes in and out of Eddie talking, because it feels like the board game Clue, right? You got the coroner, and you hear the cellos, dum, 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 dum. And then I made sure the pauses were right when Eddie's giving like these punchy details, and then Eddie just full-blown mirroring all of our suspicions.
Mm-hmm.
And in his arrogance and being some woman shot me kind of thing. Oh, I was cleaning my gun and it went off, and whatever story he was saying, it's like, nah, you were fighting. She got scared and you got shot with her little 22. Because it's like, the only reason we had 22s, I had a 22 because he gave me a 22.
With something he's very confident about, right? Like, he's very convinced.
Well, he knew his dad.
Yeah.
He's like, my dad, there's no way he would have taken a 22. Like, he had been around
Yeah.
his dad enough.
Yeah, this is a guy that stuck his arm and lost his arm.
Let's just back up to that story. Like, this is a guy that stuck his arm into a washing machine
And lost half his body.
Yeah, so he's not going to take a 22. And in the stomach, like, this part I didn't know either, because Shirley failed to leave this part out too. He didn't die right away.
No.
And we mentioned that in the episode. He was in the hospital for 20 days.
Yeah.
Before he died. Like, he had a slow and painful death. And I don't know if it's like becomes a stark comedy because we just listened to Eddie, share all of these horrifying abuse stories. So in a way it's like, oh, he got what he deserved.
Yeah. But it just doesn't match. It doesn't match the persona. Ed, he's a barrel of the gun in the mouth kind of guy, if you ask me. And I do love, though, the complexity of Eddie and everybody saying, still totally his fault. Like, we're never going to say, right? It also adds that element of old Western movie of the sheriff's going to be like, oh, yeah, his cute young wife shot him, and he had it coming. It's like law enforcement is saying, we're going to turn a blind eye to this one because this problem kind of solved itself.
And who knows the criminal record they pulled up.
Of course, they already probably wanted him in.
And something else that the audience doesn't know, and we didn't really even have to share it because, everything you just said, but Ed often got a gun out in fights with Shirley. And he would do it with Anne, too, where he often, and maybe this is one of the reasons why Shirley never really felt like she could protect the kids, because she was so scared like Ed might do something worse to them. So my understanding is Ed would often get a gun out whenever they were arguing. And I'm sure it scared Anne was 19, 20. Yeah. She's young. And I'm curious to know, too, if it's the same girl Clay talks about, he ran off with an underage girl. And which kind of makes sense because I could not for the life of me find a marriage certificate for Ed and Anne, but the death certificate does list that they were indeed married, and the newspaper clippings confirm that they were married. But I'm wondering if they, got married in a state I just don't know about. Maybe it was Tennessee or West Virginia. I
think I found one.
Did you find one of them? We should,
Yeah.
Because I do remember spending some time researching and trying to find. Because Shirley never told me that they were married. She just said he was with Anne. She was so thankful he found Anne. Like, she called Anne her saving grace.
And look, and that paints another picture, right, about Ed's mental state. Mm-hmm. Somebody that threatens, well, I'm going to kill myself if you don't do what I say, right? Or
who knows, maybe he's threatening to kill them. I was just told that he would often get a gun out in the middle of arguments.
I think I was talking to your dad once, and he said he threatened to kill himself if you
Is
know.
that
Oh, and I don't know. Here's the other thing that's really alarming is you never you hear a lot about Shirley's dad drinking, but you never know if Ed or
There
anybody
wasn't
else
one story. Clay never mentioned
where there
him
was
drinking
substances or
yeah.
alcohol. So that makes it even that much more disturbing that these are thoughts, these are things that he's doing stone cold sober. These are coming from within. This isn't something that's impaired.
Well, to go back to his parents, I mean, we do learn about Ed's dad through Eddie, and Eddie mentions in Clay that grandma was a witch, and Eddie, he even trailed a little softly there too, where he's like, yeah, not like today's white magic. And
No, he says because the Wiccans are the ones today that are kind of pop culture. He's like, she was an actual black magic witch.
Yes, and I wish, like, this is one of the questions I wish I would have had the opportunity to ask Shirley, is what were Ed's parents like? I never asked her that question, and it didn't even cross my mind. But my dad did say that, oh no, she was a witch, and Shirley often told my dad, like, she was the witch that would actually put spells on people. Like, people would go to her in the neighborhood. I don't think just for, like, tarot card readings, like Eddie said, but they went to her to actually put spells on people. So that kind of gives you a little bit more insight into Ed's upbringing. Like growing up with a mom who puts spells on people and a dad's abuse stories that are way worse than Eddie's. And Clay, what was he? Oh, I think he only said one thing about Ed's mom.
And his mom was a total, absolute 100% loser.
So we arrive in Alaska, and he tells us all the stories, and that episode by itself, though, is so complete. I do like how within that whole episode, you see a full spectrum of Eddie's thoughts and Eddie's feelings and Eddie's ability to resolve. So it leaves you with the question, is he ever going to do that with Shirley? Which is probably why Eddie felt like the rug was pulled out from under him when she died. It shows his ability to recount this deep trauma, but also have a sense of redemption. It shows his ability to show resentment and his hurt, but also his ability to forgive and redeem. And I think that's the theme that goes throughout the whole story, right? And then, very tenderly, he's like, hey, when he's talking about his dad's ashes, he's talking about everybody knows. And I think it's a nod back to this idea, again, of us peeking into this crystal ball of time, looking to this time where he shows, unlike a lot of other stories, he shows that Ed's real death doesn't affect him at all. He talks about the funeral.
Oh, he was relieved.
He talks about, that's another very interesting detail too, that is a good clue as to Ed not killing himself, because he's like, I see this hand and I only knew it strong.
Yeah.
He's like, and to see it feeble. And then he says, cool.
Yeah. And then he also makes that comment about, like,
I remember when I went to the funeral, and when we walked in, the first thing I was amazed at is like, who are all these people? And why are they crying? You know, why are you crying for this dead guy? You know, because I'm like, ding dong, the wicked witch is dead. You know, it's like, I just totally didn't get it. You know, all these people. One, that he even had friends. You know, was I knew a few because he was a biker and whatnot, and so there's some rough guys that would come around from time to time. But you know, I was amazed at how many people were at this funeral, and it was an open casket, and I was there to make sure he's really dead because I'd heard this before.
Yeah,
he refers to his dad as the Wicked Witch.
Yeah, and he also didn't understand why there were so many people there, because he didn't think that many people liked his dad. And
he must have been part of like a motorcycle gang or something.
Yeah. which is kind of gangster if you think about it.
because Clay accounts the time that he rode his motorcycle from Ohio to Alaska with one arm.
So let's revisit the rebel without a cause persona again, because again, we hear everything that Ed was, and we should all be judging him and saying this guy is a scumbag. Like this guy, there's no redeeming anything. But when even Clay, when he's like, dude, he bought a motorcycle and he rode it from Ohio to Alaska with one arm, and you hear kind of this admiration in his voice, like that's pretty hardcore.
It's almost impossible. Like, how does somebody do that?
Well, and then Eddie is like, and then he built these cabins with one arm, and he rebuilt an engine.
Yeah, fixed the transmission
and
in their
he
truck.
rode a motorcycle all over the place, and he did all these things, and he got a job on the pipeline with one arm, right?
And lied in the interview.
Yeah.
And
so
had his fake arm on.
There's like this admiration. So the funny thing is, I really early on, I shared this part of the podcast with one of my friends. I shared it with Casey, right? And we were talking. I was like, dude, this dude did some whacked out stuff. Like this guy, the story is so unreal. And he rode a motorcycle with one arm. And all Casey said was respect, because I ride a motorcycle, and you have a clutch and you have an accelerator, and you need 2 arms and 2 feet.
So do you think he was using his prosthetic and like wrapping it, like tying it to the other handlebar? Like how would he have actually ridden a motorcycle with one arm?
I honestly don't know. There's because in the time period, and I don't know enough about motorcycles, and hopefully like motorheads, maybe even Eddie knows this answer. Maybe he could have been riding a motorcycle with a centrifugal clutch, which means it has, like your automatic car, it has a clutch where you just shift. And I have a motorcycle, an Aprilia, that you can put in automatic mode, which I rode when I had a broken foot. But those are really rare. And I don't know if that technology was there. Maybe it was. So that way, because he lost his right arm too. So the accelerator is your right hand. So was he... And look, he also seemed very mechanical, so...
Yeah, I wonder if he built some sort of contraption.
Did he swap the handlebars? So the accelerator, I mean, it was just reversed, but it was in his left hand. He had to have modified something for him to be able to ride it. But still, just the equilibrium of riding a motorcycle on a highway, which was not paved, it was a gravel,
dirt road.
The balance and the strength that he needed to hold. You don't ride little bikes cross country like that. You ride big bikes that are heavy, that are hundreds of pounds. So that's why for me, when Eddie's talking about this hand, I can imagine this knobby, strong. And the other thing too is Ed was building things and doing these things with one arm, which means it's like I'm right arm dominant. So when I lift weights or I do some type of exercise, my right arm gets slightly bigger because I lead, like it's my, right? It's like when you lose your vision, your hearing gets far more acute. It's when you lose one limb, your other limb gets super strong. Like I knew a person that could beat everybody at arm wrestling because she had crutches, because she had like something with her legs. So we were like, dude, this girl beats everybody at arm wrestling. But it's because she's using her arms all day. So it's that kind of thing where I can just imagine how strong this dude's arm was from all these things that he couldn't do. And so you hear people very objectively say, hey, Ed was brutal. Ed did all these things. But there's also that little, man, that's pretty impressive that he did all of these things. And that's also a good window into how Shirley was so taken by him her whole life.
I don't know if a lot of listeners picked up on it, but in episode 2, Shirley talks about how she went to the lake with her friend Joe to meet Ronnie, and Ronnie wasn't there. But Ed and Ed's friend Jim was there. And then in episode 3, Shirley mentions, Ed changing his name and heading up to Alaska, and he changes his name to Jim Edwards.
Yeah.
And I've always wondered, I was like, oh, was it Jim and Jim's life that he stole?
Yeah, because, well, if Jim was his buddy, I think if they got locked up together and Ed managed to get out and Jim stayed in prison, his life's over.
Yeah.
So he can steal his identity.
Yeah, so I almost wonder if that's kind of how Ed did it. It's just one of those theories, in the back of my mind. I'm like, I bet he took his friend's name. Or did he just take the first name, Jim, and then he took his first name, Edward, and made it Edwards because he changed his name to Jim Edwards. But I don't know if a lot of people picked up on that or not, but that's kind of a cool... And there's so many of those happenstances and like stories that we mention, and they're followed up later on down the road.
And they're really subtle.
Very subtle. You really have to be paying attention.
I think I'm going to change my name. If you find me in Canada, my name will be Ed Josherson.
Ed Josherson. But no, episode 3 ends with us calling Anne.
Yeah.
And letting, the viewers know that, or letting the listeners know that Anne blocked us.
Yeah. And
I'm still holding out hope, though, that Anne might hear this and, reach out to us.
And I hope she's had a great life, and I hope you can't be around stories like this and not have a certain level of trauma. But also, I did love how a lot of the major players are gone, and Eddie holds only goodwill in that story.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, I would love to talk to her. And if
anything, just to know how she's doing.
Yeah, and it's sincere. It's sincere. It's hey, just so you know, none of us are, there's no judgment here. We're all
like, we get it.
We're all friends.
We get it. Yeah. Like, I just want to know how you're doing. And also like, hey, where are my dad's ashes?
Yeah.
You're the only one that knows.
That's such a tender end to him revealing these horrific moments in life and then saying, hey, I've made peace with every tiny aspect of this story.
One of my top favorite things, working on this podcast is not just being able to like have those aha moments or validating the stories, but also listening to Eddie give such like great detail in his storytelling.
Yeah, his accounts are.
Yeah, later on I'm going through photo albums and there it is. Like there's Eddie's stories. Like and one that sticks out is just him talking about that house in California with the long red front porch. And there's probably 10 photos in this photo album of them in California.
Yeah, and we just
posted kids on, playing on the red front porch.
And so we just posted those on Instagram because it was so neat to find those. But also, he does paint an incredible picture. And it was so exciting to go through these photos and find Wolf Dog.
Yes.
And then in the pictures.
Episode 3, we get an introduction of Wolf Dog, and he kind of stays with us throughout the rest of the podcast.
Yeah. And, we find the picture of Ed, and we're like, oh, wow, he does look like Paul Newman.
I know. We're like, is that Ed? Oh my God, that's Ed. He only has one arm, right? We're like, that's Ed.
I think it's funny. I met Skaggs before I met Eddie. And so for me to sit down with Skaggs and hear him talk about Wolf Dog, I got the story in reverse. To hear Skaggs and whatever, everything that whole interview went along with, but hear him say, he talks about all these other animals. He compares one to a cockroach, to another one a piece of ceramic. Like these animals that were just these worthless pieces that had no use, like he had no use for. But then him really talk about his affinity for wolf. And that was very interesting to me, to see this Wolf Dog be a common thread, right? To hear him talk about this noble creature, this protector, this just only, to hear Skaggs say that Wolf was only good, only.
And for me, it just connected all the stories. Like Wolf Dog connected everything. Wolf Dog was the connection to Ed.
Yeah.
To Eddie.
Yeah.
To Skaggs.
Yeah, and that's...
Like, how cool is that? Like, to have something that all three of them...
Yeah, and that's the correlation that I'm making is you hear first Skaggs, right? Mm-hmm. And all of the context that surrounds him. Talking about this dog that is just this noble, everything that's right with nature, this creature.
They did have one pet that I absolutely loved. And that was Wolf. Wolf was the most wonderful guy.
And at that point, it was years later, right? And then you hear Eddie talk about, I met this scary looking wolf dog that became my protector.
Big wolf dog runs out from underneath the truck that's there in the driveway as we're getting out of the car, ready to eat us at the end of a chain, and he is smugly like, "That's your dog." And then I'm like, okay. We had a little Chihuahua thing as a pet, and here's this big wolf dog comes out. Now, of course, that wolf dog would become my best friend in the years to come, and
right. So you hear that story in a different timeline. He's like, he protected us from the kids on the Indian reservation. He protected us from other animals. He protected us from potentially scary situations. And then Skaggs, right, initially he says he protected the kids. He used to bite my leg, and I would say, okay, wolf.
Yeah.
And then Eddie reveals, hey, let me tell you about the positive impact that my father had on the world. He rescued a wolf and hand-fed it, and it was an animal that could have been discarded, the runt of the litter, and my dad turned it into this really meaningful thing.
Yeah.
My dad turned it into this very meaningful part of my life, that my whole life was my protector. Right? We couldn't have written that better.
Well, not only that, but we get the beginning of Wolf Dog.
Yeah.
Being the runt of the litter, how Ed nursed it, to becoming Eddie's childhood best friend, to then Skaggs not only falling in love with Wolf Dog, but Skaggs was the one who had to go
and
put Wolf Dog down. So we get an entire story. And yeah, speaking of like timelines and in different states, like Wolf Dog started in Alaska with Shirley, and Ed in her first marriage, and ended in Arizona with her second marriage.
It's a pretty solid metaphor of Skaggs inheriting what Ed started, right? Skaggs inheriting these kids that Ed nurtured. Mm-hmm. So Ed nurtured this wolf in the most, how do I say it, in the most magnificent way.
Loving. It's where we see Ed's love. Like, Ed does have love in him.
Yeah, but Skaggs also inherited these biological children of Ed's that he, because of all of his internal turmoils, was not able to nurture the way that he was able to nurture Wolf.
And isn't it fascinating, too, that, like, you have both of Shirley's husbands that love Wolf Dog.
Mm-hmm. That's the common thread.
They both connected with Wolf Dog.
Yeah. There isn't anybody in this story that disliked. And I love that it's a wolf dog. It wasn't a Cocker Spaniel. It wasn't, I mean? This was something.
And it was literally Eddie says it's first generation wolf. One of Ed's huskies
and
was accidentally bred with a wolf, or a wolf got into the yard. I don't know the exact story there, but it sounds like a wild wolf
but it shows,
bred with one of his huskies.
And it shows this discerning quality in Ed to take this potentially taboo mix and turn it into something that was, again, a resourceful thing that he was doing. And I love that it's a wolf. It's like, it's such a movie.
Doesn't Skaggs talk about like how big his teeth, like his fangs were? He's like, and he had fangs this big.
Yeah. And so I think,
and his head was like this big.
Yeah, it's totally out of a find your own adventure novel, and it's so great. I do love also how Eddie, again, through these stories, we're exposed to the intellect that is Eddie. Because he didn't have to give details, but he gives the context. And again, it's him kind of showing an admiration for his father. Like, this is a wolf dog. The reason my dad saw it as, oh, this is a great advantage that I'm going to use in my favor. The wolves, he gets scientific about the wolves, and he says the wolves have the ability to regulate the temperature in their paws, and that's what makes them optimal, and that's what my dad understood. So there's a lot of really subtle skills that you see that get developed throughout. And so he also talks about dynamics, Eddie does, about the dynamics of the wolves with the huskies. He's like, oh, those yappy huskies, they do all of the pulling, the wolves do all of the leading. What a fun metaphor of this thing, this person, this character that should be an outcast in any story becomes kind of the hero.
Coming up next time.
Brutal murder of an Anchorage woman. In the city of Fairbanks, Alaska.
They both fit the 1980s FBI profile of serial killers, right?
He's the one who invited me to the Pentecostal church. That's where I got saved. That's where I got healed from my arthritis.